Hi guys, today I thought it would be really cool to do a little bit of a Q&A because I posted one on my Instagram the other day and some of the questions that came up were very pertinent, very interesting and things that many of you asked at the same time. So I thought it would be cool to do a little bit of a collective check-in. So the first one that someone asked, and then everybody asked like a variation of this same question, is speak about Trump and Elon Musk falling out. So the interesting thing about this to me is that I feel like almost everyone in the world could tell that it was only a matter of time before this did happen. And I say this, as a non-American citizen, I say this just purely looking at the sort of energetic unfolding of how people and patterns and personalities and personas and egos and worries kind of clash. It's sort of a chemistry equation for me. Like if you mix hydrogen with oxygen, you get water. And I think we all do that to an extent. We all kind of get what's going on. So them falling out is so interesting to me because your ego must be so strong when it's you inside that situation to not see what everyone else is kind of feeling is coming. And it really taught me something about the fact that we are the ones who are blind. And what gets in our way is us telling these stories of like pie in the sky, the best kind of idea, wanting someone else to bolster us, talking each other up, loving the idea of something rather than the actual listening to the cues of how it sort of plays out in the early stages. It's like you want to be taking in data along every step of the way and giving yourself permission to acknowledge it and have it make your story or your dream of it or your highest possible version kind of pivot. And the same way, you also want things to be helping you pivot your lowest possible. If you're someone who rehearses sort of negative situations happening, you want to be like paying attention to life and seeing that maybe there's some evidence that is slowly at the beginning very quiet, that it's suggesting to you that things might not work out the way they do. And sometimes our egos have to get so overwhelming and so big that we're so blind before it gets too late and you're on the world stage and it's all coming crashing down and it's taken away two people's dignity. And now it's just kind of a scrap to save dignity, but it's messy and you can't undo what you have imposed upon many other people, because the more impact you have, the more your alignment or misalignment kind of is obvious to other people, but also impacts other people, also makes a kind of impression on people. And so I remember my mom used to say when we were kids, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. And so taking care of your own integrity, your own reputation, how you conduct yourself, and that comes with wanting to see the areas where you are blind and not letting your spiritual practice convince you that you are blind, not letting your academic chops convince you that you are blind in the specific areas that you specialize in, not letting your wealth define your ability to be able to do anything and tell you that that must mean that you're going to be successful at everything just because that's what the ego wants you to do. The ego, its only task is to keep us all walking around blind so that we don't look at our blind spots, because our blind spots is where we grow from. The blind spots are the opportunity for the becoming. And so every time we get a negative sense or a negative emotion, instead of what we do as a society, which is run from them or band-aid them or not give them enough time and our attention because we're running around doing so many things instead of piecing out all the different components of our day, then we can't grow. So just from a purely energetic perspective, it's really fascinating to me that what a lot of people felt was going to happen has happened, and that we should all kind of take that as a lesson for all of us, that nothing makes us invincible. No amount of knowing, no amount of praying, no amount of meditating, no amount of anything. We are the divine. And we are also human at the same time. And we also strive to be very humble, strive to be begging the light, begging the creator to show us our darkness, our faults, our flaws, our blind spots. And we should be, if we can, be begging the people that we trust in our lives to also help us with those things. So it's just a very different way of living than what we've been taught to do and what's around us. But it's a very, very freeing thing. And, you know, like the example of these two men, imagine what could have happened if they'd paved the way in their own lives to different kinds of consciousness. You know, would they have even wound up here in the first place? And if they had, would it have been a better version? And would they ever even have to have allied in the first place? We don't know. And it also is really fascinating to me because I was looking at the astrology of the USA as a country last year, the astrology of the USA throughout 2025. And you have two different layers in astrology, where you have personal astrology, where it's about you and who you came here as and what you're going through and the transits and how they're affecting you and the current energy, the challenges you're going through, all of that kind of thing. But then you also have what's called mundane astrology. And mundane astrology is the astrology of our world, the everyday life, the current events. And so when we're looking at the chart of the US, I started to wonder the things that I saw that the US would have to go through. I started to wonder whether ultimately, for example, a very volatile market would have had to have happened because of this march towards a better world. The necessary next step that the US had to go through is, let's say, for example, a volatile market, and that the two different parties that were up for election, would they have both created that, but in completely different ways? Like Kamala Harris wouldn't have maybe pulled tariffs and then repromised tariffs and pulled tariffs and repromised tariffs, but could there have been one bill of legislation that could have happened, or I don't know what? And so it kind of makes me think that when someone is on the world stage, like Trump or Musk less, I guess, but your personal astrology kind of affects the mundane astrology, but it also gets dictated in a way by the mundane astrology. Obviously, the way you iterate it can be positive or negative, but you are sort of locked into a contract with the astrology of world events. And so if the world has to go through this, you know, mass spiritual awakening, there's going to be a version of it that's going to happen no matter what. And that's not to say that there aren't better versions of spiritual awakening, more graceful ones and more tough ones. But it's also funny that in the moment, we cannot judge what's ultimately good or bad. We can only judge, though, this is what we can judge. We can judge the intentions with which something is done. And that really is the control that we have over everything, is what we choose to do and the intention behind it, the energy behind it, what we choose to become. So I just thought it was really interesting that the US was going to US anyway. Obviously, this is a very specific version that it has iterated in, but the US has to go through this mass I guess, apex of polarization in order to actually create more togetherness ultimately. And so it would have probably, I wonder if that was going to happen either way, that increased polarity is having to happen regardless. And that's not to excuse the choices that the individuals that play a part in that make. And that also includes us. So that's just some food for thought, and we can probably readdress this and kind of keep it as an ongoing story rather than this be the comprehensive version of all of this. But those are just the thoughts that are kind of crossing my mind. Someone else asked me about ancient practices like Ayurveda, Chinese traditional medicine, and yoga in the new paradigm. It's funny because we tend to be so black and white about these things, where we either want to say ancient practices knew it all and man back in the day was doing this and this and this and therefore that's how we should be doing it, or people want to say it was wrong, or it's, you know, not give it the time of day because it's not scientific. As usual, as is common, the answer is somewhere in the middle, where if you remember that the people who contributed to these things were also human, and so they're goes into these methodologies the overall average mix of the different consciousness and motives and ideas of what went into the people who created these things and who added to these things along the years. So what I'm saying is it's not going to become irrelevant, but that we need to figure out this new understanding that it was created in a time that was contextual, right? Like they were dealing with a different world than we are. And also that the human need to universalize something as being always true has always been there. Human nature hasn't changed. So the person who was coming up with Chinese traditional medicine was in China to no fault of his own. Localized view. That's a limitation on the gifts of TCM, of the benefits of TCM. There are people who I could say, for example, just as an idea, that the people who end up loving yoga and it's aligned for them to do yoga get born with the kinds of bodies that they need to be doing yoga, right? Whether they're like super yoga bodies and super flexible, or because they themselves had to go through this journey of learning how to become all those things. But for us, if we're not drawn to it, it doesn't mean that yoga is bad for us. It could be that not doing yoga is what protects you from one day having a back injury that you would have only ever encountered if you chose to fall into this conditioning of thinking that you had to do yoga because what it was going to give you. So these things are never, I don't think, going to disappear. But I do feel that we are going to become more, we have to become more empowered to pick and choose and not say what's easy, right? Which is TCM is right, or yoga is wrong, or Ayurveda is irrelevant, or it doesn't make sense, or it's contra to science. Nothing is contra to anything. Just certain aspects and angles of those things are contra to other people. But in terms of the field of consciousness, we need them all to exist because there are so many truths that seem to counter act each other or contradict each other, but that's because they are subjectively true. So there are times when it's good to have sun, right, in your day, but that doesn't mean this sun is good for you. It means that dosage is important. The same with all these things. And for someone who would go on a journey of actually trying to find out and really test things on themselves and listen to their authority, someone could be doing Ayurveda by the book. The person who that would be aligned for is the person who's really tried it on for size and said, wow, I've surprised myself because literally everything does work for me all the time for today. Versus the person who's like, I'm going to do it because my mind thinks I've heard all the convincing marketing and the convincing people talk about it. And I want it so badly to be the thing that saves me from my anxiety, my ailments, my discomfort in my own health, in my journey, in my identity, in my body, and so on and so forth. So that's what I mean by intention. That's why intention is so important, and being able to check in with what your intention is and clean out the parts of your intention, because sometimes it could be like 80 or 90% pure, but then these little other things that kind of hijack it that are like ego intentions, right? So you could really resonate with something and really feel so connected to it, but then there's a small part of you that wants to do it because of you know, male attention or something, right? And that's when you have to say, okay, I'm going to give myself permission to go and do this thing. But at the times when I want to post it because I know someone is looking, or I want to make sure that my mat goes to the guy who's cute in the class, not because I like him, but because if he's hot and he's into me, then that means I'm hot. Like all of that kind of those little things, we want to be pulling out those threads all the time. And then it can become fun, but not to get something from a situation. And then someone asked me about sidereal astrology, which is kind of an extension of that first question, where none of it is wrong. I personally don't use it because normal Western, I guess, tropical astrology, as opposed to sidereal, which is known as Vedic sometimes too, it just doesn't speak to me in the same way. It's like if someone picks up a paintbrush and you also want them to be making music. Sometimes they can do both and sometimes they can't. For this moment, I haven't felt called to explore more of it. And the way I learned was tropical. And sidereal, I still don't understand, and I would love if someone does answer this question for me. But sidereal actually means from the point of view of the stars. And to my mind, if I'm interested in what's happening on Earth, I like to look at it from the point of view of Earth. But that's absolutely not to say that there are some sidereal people and some Vedic people that are incredible. And I actually really think that all of these modalities, all truths lead to Rome. all truths are leading you to the same place. So it's actually about finding someone who can use that modality for you or read that modality for you, whose intentions are pure. Because when their intentions are pure, they get out of the way and the universe speaks through them to be in service to you, regardless of whatever the framework is that they're using, right? So if it's like an Akashic Records person or a healer or a Reiki person or a human design person, whatever it is, there's a lot of bad ones and there's a lot of good ones. That's sort of my stance with it. And of course, you have to make sure that there's also people who have, and I guess it does come back to service, that they respect their craft enough to not abuse it and use it to pretend like they know more than they do, or to give them some kind of elevation. So when all of that's out of the way, all of these things can tell you the same thing. And because we are on a scale as human beings, there's always more that we're going to have to clean up. So it's not about finding the perfect person to go to, but it's just someone who's enough out of their own way where you can really try to trust that what they're giving you is in full service to you, and they are basically opening up a direct communication from the universe, your guides, your the universe, your God, whoever it is, to you. And all they've done is kind of open the door and just been a mouthpiece in terms of the words they say and the moves they make and the actions that they take and the way they move their hands and so on and so forth. So it's this funny paradox, because on the one hand, you do have to devote yourself to your craft, no matter what it is that you do, and see it as a sacred craft. And then also, once you are comfortable in it, step aside and realize that it does matter, but also kind of doesn't, because the flow with your craft is simply to be in the energy of being a conduit to whatever creative energy is coming forward. It's like you have to learn all the musical notes, or you have to learn how to sing, or you have to learn how to get these tunes out of you in order to write the music. Someone else asked me about vanity and is it okay to want to look a certain way? And this is so loaded because there's so much pressure to look perfect in today's world that there ever has been before. So I think the desire to look a certain way is more subject to conditioning now than it ever has been before, because you're more likely to want to look like how you've seen thousands of people all look the same way on the internet, right? With the massive lips and the like filled up cheeks and the same color hair and style. So when you look at that and you catch yourself wanting to be a part of that, you can kind of know more or less that that's probably a very heavily conditioned desire to look that way, much more than if you lived 100 years ago and you saw people of all different colors and shaped faces, and those were the only 100 people you ever saw. Although ironically, actually, as I say that, they probably looked more like you too, right? We didn't have people with different skin colors and in the village. So number one is, do we want the vanity because we want the success, or because we think it's going to make us attractive to men, or the only way that we think is going to find us a partner or finally make us worthy? And by the way, we all have those things because they are so deeply held by the conditioning field that it's so hard to get out of those things. But at the same time, it's actually a God-given desire to experience beauty on this earth. And that can be internally and externally. So we want to feel beauty on the inside. We want to feel like we have become wonderful people. And we also are here to be tickled and delighted by life. We're also here to see beauty because beauty does something to us. It changes us internally. It reshapes things. I mean, there's so many scientific explanations that we are wired for beauty because it kind of gears us towards our best self. There's a reason why everything in nature is made beautiful. It's for our appreciation. It's for our understanding that that means something is functioning well. So in nature, if a flower is blooming and it's blooming beautifully, it means that the plant is healthy. It means that it's in sync with divine timing. It means that it's telling us something, that it is ready to be picked or ready to be seeded or whatever it is. So all these beauty things are actually messages. When your environment looks beautiful to you, it's what a wonderful gift, because that's the thing that induces the feeling of calm or being pleased, or again, being tickled, being elevated. Kind of, it changes your mood, right? So why wouldn't we want to look great? Why wouldn't we want to look a certain way? We just have to make sure that we want to look the authentic way that is true to us, instead of do things to ourselves that only take us further away from the authentic expression of our beauty. And I really do believe that everyone is made beautiful. And it's not to say that you can't get little things done here and there, but that there probably will come a time, and sooner than we think, that a lot of things that we have thought we had to do to be more accepted beauty in the last couple of years, when you do things to your face, even though you can technically have them dissolved or undone, it kind of doesn't restore you back to the original situation. So it's just something to be very mindful of. But absolutely okay to want to look a certain way. And like the flowers that bloom, when we are vital on the inside, that is when we become beautiful. Even down to micro things. Like, for example, I know that I tense my jaw is my area that I get tense in. And I know that I look different when I've been tensing a lot. And I know that, to me, I look more beautiful. My face has spent more time not tensing that muscle. So the face looks more relaxed and open. And then that really does, on a very, very tiny level, reshape how I perceive myself. And I'm sure how other people perceive me too, but maybe not to that level of awareness. But it does transmit and beam across a slightly different vibration, one that is maybe more inviting, one that is more warm, one that signals a different side of my personality, the more relaxed side than the tense side. All of that is coming across in the way that we beam to other people. So I think it's actually great to want to look your best and feel your best, and to be in love with how you are in all ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually, but also to not fall into this deep desire to be in a constant battle to be prettier than anyone else, or be beautiful because you don't feel like you can confidently share your message online without that, or to the point where you think it has to be consistent every day, where one day of having puffy eyes is a day that you can't accept yourself, and therefore reinforces the old stories that you're not good enough. It's like we want to see it from up above and kind of look at, is it going directionally in the right way? Like, do I want to be on this journey of every day that I'm alive, constantly adding to my desire to become more vital as time goes on, more alive, more in love with life, more myself, more on my purpose, more sharing of what I came here to share, because your kind of looks, or your how people perceive you, is only ever increased with time that way, not decreased with time, as much aging conditioning might tell us. Like, people become more magnetic when they've had longer in their lives of being alive to compound the time that they've invested into their greatness in all ways. A lot of people asked about which I guess is a similar to the Trump and Elon question, which is, how will politics change in the new earth? There's a lot to say, and I'll give specifics probably in a new paradigm workshop on the app pretty soon. But something that we need to know is that the new paradigm is bringing in so many things, but there are many old paradigm things that we built during the last 200 or so years that were beautiful, that we get to keep. And a political structure has been around since many paradigms before those 200 and something years, since 1781. Politics is thousands of years old. So it's not necessarily that having a government is wrong. Obviously, there are ways with which we are using it, and the consciousness and the amount of meddling and reach it has, and the charge it has, that is largely incorrect. But if we all play different roles in our lives, and we are all supposed to be specialists at our role, there are people who are amazing at creating laws, at creating value systems, at advocating for other people when those people are in positions where they can't advocate for themselves. having other people's best interests at heart. There are people who are good at drafting bills. It's not things that you and I would want to do. It's not things that you and I would care to do, but we want someone who we think is great and responsible to be doing them. And so we do need people in those situations. And, politics is actually much more about care and nurture than it has come to be shown. And back in the day, in the Roman Empire, there was always a philosopher underneath the ruler. So the ruler would be in charge of, let's say, I'm simplifying this, but that was who kind of conquered countries and was the sort of big dog, as it were, that everyone was scared of. But the person who was in charge of the law and the governing of the people and coming up with the theory and the practice of what this country or this empire stood for was always the philosophers. It was always Stoics. And so they played a vital part in politics. So I personally dream of a time when we sort of go back to the model of consulting the people who are really good theoreticists and then not expecting that to be the same kind of gift as someone who's a sort of encourager, communicator to us, telling us what's going on, the person that we can lean on for like trying times. They're different skills. And so it's kind of crazy that we've come to expect that one person should be able to do all of them. And that really only came with the coming of camera. I think it was accentuated because all of a sudden someone who was a good politician now had to be a good actor, good on screen, had to look good, had to front well, had to all of those things. So I wonder if politics in the new paradigm is going to be more of a group effort at the top of the leadership, that we know who to go to for what, and not like separated by how it is now, like defense and this and that, but truly a coming together of different skills. And I don't know, that's obviously a conversation that we will be having at some point, but politics is not going anywhere, or let's say government isn't going anywhere, nor should it. Taking the politics out of politics probably should, but again, we're all human, and if we're given a bigger stage, we become more dramatic than if it's just in our lives. So we also have to understand that what we see in them is just a reflection of the average human condition, how we are as humans. And as much as our world has changed, our work is still the same, which is to overcome the temptation to do the things about humans that aren't so great, and to resist and restrain when those temptations come up. Someone asked me about, actually 3 people asked me about people who work in the spiritual industry but don't live their values. I think there's going to be, and I've mentioned this before, there's going to be a really big weeding out of people in this industry, especially in the next year or so, because there's going to be such a mass spiritual awakening. The universe needs people who are taking other people's hand down that road to come correct. So if you are not fully coming correct, the universe will sort of rearrange it because it's not going to want to use those people. So we don't really have to do anything about it. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to, run around trying to figure out who's right, who's wrong, or play any of that game, because that's also ego. We just have to know that it will all be very, very obvious soon, especially when everybody is much more of an energy reader. And this goes across all industries. Anything nefarious that we try to hide or conceal from other people is going to be so silly, because people are going to be able to see it. Not just like see right through it, like, oh, we all get the vibes. Like, it's going to be blatantly obvious. And so we may as well start now trying not to be pretend in any way, or not trying to, front or force or have any other like more not so great motives driving the things that we do, even though we would die to say that that we're doing it for a much more noble reason. Like, let's just do what's noble to us and not do anything, not take one action unless it's driven by something that's very noble. Not for the clickbait, not for the attention, not for the relevance, not to, hardcore sell to someone if what you've deposited in them is a feeling of lack. or jealousy, showing off, all of these things that we currently think don't cost us a lot, they will. So if we want to be picked up by the current, the highest timeline by the universe, we got to start doing it the right way before the universe tells us it's ready to, because obviously everyone will be able to see everything we've ever done too. So it's time to really clean up our act. And I don't say that in a shamey way. I say it in a way that we've got this. We're built for it. This is the time now. And I feel so grateful that we are all getting prepared, because if you really want to be in service, that's what needs to happen. And this is helpful. Someone else asked me about how do we stay positive when so many people are struggling. And I'm going to do a separate podcast about specifically the consciousness of why there are terrible things that do happen in the world and how we are supposed to address those, which I resisted doing for such a long time. People have been asking me literally since October the 7th, and I just never felt like I had the right thing to say. And so I just never said anything unless I felt like there was an actual contribution I could make to the overall perspective of it, whether tiny or significant. But it came to me the other day, so I will do a podcast on that. But the one thing you cannot do to yourself is guilt yourself into feeling bad because you feel like that's somehow being good because other people are struggling, because that means that you're signaling that you're a good person or just reaffirming it silently to yourself. You also can't manufacture negative feelings by mentally rehearsing what's going on in the world around you. You have to be in your life and authentically letting space for whatever feelings and senses are coming to you to come to you. Because let's say, for example, if you are so sad about what's happening in what was happening with the LA fires, and of course it's beautiful to be empathetic and obviously all of that, like it's so important to, because we are connected and we are tapped into the collective. So this is not a either or, but to the degree where we might be almost conveniently making our whole day's attention about an acute situation that is happening, can kind of be a little bit of a form of escape, because we are also then not taking any note or any ability to notice that we are going through a negative feeling or a positive feeling. But the feelings that the universe is trying to send us that we are going through, that's happening in as a result of the lives that are adjacent to ours, those are the things that are the cues to our becoming, the things that is our curriculum, like our to-do list from the universe is like, I need you to feel like you are lost because that's how you're gonna get on purpose. I need you to feel like you are triggered by your mom instead of tell yourself you don't have it that bad because there's kids starving somewhere else. Like, we need to do it. We need to feel empathetic. We need to feel the pain of the world because the world is going through just a massive, massive apex of suffering for so many reasons. And that is true. And at the same time, we have to know that what contributes to the soup of the suffering is the collective consciousness, and the only consciousness that you can control is yours. And so it's an illusion to tell yourself, unless you are the person whose purpose it is to actually go to LA and, give free cash cards away, or to also, as part of your day, give clothes to your neighbor or give clothes to your friend who lives halfway across the world, or send money to something, like all of those things. But that's still making it happen in your life, right? That's you having a response to something that's making you ache so much that you then take action on it. But to sit there and just feel bad because you think that it's not okay to also feel good is to deny the fact that we are living in a soup. This human experience is a soup. There's so many layers. If we over focus on only one layer, which is that the news obviously tries to make us do, and TikTok makes us do, and the communities that we find us in, like they narrow our focus. And so if your day becomes about the only thing I can do is make myself feel bad and think about how bad things are, or a disproportionate amount of that day even, then you are missing the swimming in the soup. And the truth is about life is that it's never all good or all bad. It's this infuriating, painful, excruciating mix of, could be a delightful moment that just happened to you today, but also long term, a loved one of yours is getting sick and it's happening at the same time. That's why I never know when people ask me, how are you? I'm like, which answer do I give here? Because I could give answers on so many different levels at any given point. So it's not about staying positive either, because we don't want to get into bypass, right? So many people are struggling. It's not a good thing to stay positive. It's a good thing to stay grounded and connected to the knowing that the more you bring in a force greater than you, the more its presence can be at work in the world in general. But also, it's not your job to stay positive. It's your job to stay yourself. It's your job to stay listening to the guidance. It's your job to stay so big of a vessel that you're able to hold pain and hope and beauty and ugliness all at the same time in your own body, and hold the space for other people to be having an experience that is radically different to yours, whether you know them or whether you hear about them, and to not feel like you have to get on the same page as people just because they're going through something difficult. And it's really hard, when someone that you love, for example, is going through a breakup. It's so difficult if you're having the best day of your life, because obviously there's compassion and there's empathy, but we don't want to hide what we're going through or dampen it down because we think that somehow makes someone feel better. Actually, we want to create a world where when someone is in the depths of something, we have people who remind us of what can be in our lives and remind us that maybe these negative moments aren't, the whole story of our lives. And maybe these negative moments was just me having a down day. But if around me, no one was trying to join me on that down day and everyone else is happy, I probably would have forgotten about it much easier or felt ready to address it more easily. Or if I had people around me, which I'm blessed to do, people who would go in and look at it with me, but not kind of get victim about it and help me see it, then you transform so much quicker. So why wouldn't we want to do that for the world, people who we don't even know? And we have to be that energy of how we would want to be with those friends that I just described, energetically to people who are across the world. The last question, a lot of people asked about AI, and so I probably am going to ask you guys to send in specific questions about AI so I can kind of cover it more comprehensively. But the one thing you need to know about AI is that there have been 24 inventions. Someone told me this the other day. 24 inventions since the beginning of time that have massively moved the needle on human evolution. Like, one was the wheel, one was the printing press, the internet. The last one is AI. So it is a really big thing coming, but I don't want any of us to be either afraid of it or getting overly excited about it because we think that's what we have to do to keep up, or that's going to be the thing that makes us smart or ready or prepared for the world that's coming next, because we feel insecure if we don't know everything it's going to do and also get excited about it and it also become its best PR. Those two different reactions are two sides of the same coin, which is fear and lack, and not remembering that this thing will shape itself based on our consciousness as a whole, but also it will shape itself in your life based on your consciousness. So as ever, the only thing to do is actually kind of not worry about it, not force yourself to learn more about it than you actually feel called to, not force yourself to not know anything about it unless you're curious about some aspects of it. You don't have to become the expert. There's this weird thing when something comes in that threatens to be life-changing, sometimes they come and go, that people feel like they have to become the pro on. Like, how many people became NFT experts 4 years ago and now where are they? And so I feel like a lot of that sort of spinning the wheels is also coming from needing to feel secure and safe in the future. And then the people who are scared of it also want to feel safe and secure in the future. And we all do. The best way to feel safe and secure in the future is to listen to what resonates with you, let your interest get piqued and tweaked at the exact speed and rate that yours is meant to, because someone else is going to take to it like a duck to water, and that's not going to be right for you, and it's going to be perfect for them. And for some people, they won't do it for 5 years, and some people have automated their lives completely according to AI already. I don't know. So don't be afraid. Don't let any of these innovations, don't let any of these new technologies or new businesses or things that promise to change the game for us, don't let them pull us out. There's going to be other things that come along these lines too, like going to space, living on Mars, outsourcing your business on Mars, putting chips in your brain. Just with all of these things, it's just best to watch and wait and learn. Like everything in human design is so much about, in order to feel aligned, you have to wait. You have to wait until you get a bodily response, which is your authority in human design, whether it's your gut check or your emotions or your spleen. And until then, you stay silent, not because you're doing nothing, but because you're still gathering more data. You're mentally gathering more data, sure, but your system is also processing. Your system is also aligning with the divine timing. The system is also waiting for other situations to either sway you or not sway you and kind of get you over the edge for the yes or the no. So much about spiritual mastery is sitting in the, it's okay that I don't know what I'm doing yet, and I can feel that life is an unknown, but the response to the unknown life is not to fake this like short-term feeling that I have of this like knowing, whether to myself or to others. That is so not the solve. So the thing with AI, don't feel like you have to, know everything about it, and don't feel afraid of it. Let it play out. Let it do its thing. It's too soon to tell right now. It's too soon to tell. And just keep saying that to yourself over and over if that helps. Or just say, I can use it for the ways that serve me, because those are the ways that the universe wants me to serve it to be serving me. And also, it's only here because it's kind of a slave for humans, right? It's actually, it doesn't have its own consciousness. It has its own cognition, but it doesn't have its own human consciousness. It doesn't have its own, spiritual purpose or spiritual connection. And so let's just remember that we are in charge of it. Maybe it will outthink us sometimes, but just like a calculator does. Maybe it will outwrite us just like a keyboard does. And that's obviously, it's a more accentuated version of that. Maybe it's going to, help us in the same way that a phone helps us sort of, see a hologram of a person who's halfway across the world, or a walkie-talkie, as Molly McCord, one of my favorite astrologers, put it the other day. Like the walkie-talkie is sort of early telepathy. It's a sort of 3D way of trying to replicate what we do in, the energetic realm. So it will be the same thing. It's never going to replace the sort of magical seed that is the crystal of consciousness that is buried in human beings. It will outdo us in many ways, just like every other technology ever has, but it's not going to do anything except for replace us. It's still kind of an inanimate object. It's great that it has cognition and it can learn and then repeat, or learn and then curate, or learn and then serve, or learn and then come up with solutions. But it's not doing anything that is not cued by pre-existing human behavior. So this will be an ongoing conversation again, but I wanted us to just kind of have a sit down where we open up these kind of topics, because obviously they will be much bigger going into the future. And let's just keep talking about them, because, things will change as the landscape changes. But currently, where we sit today, this is the best I got for you. And we'll learn as we go, just like we do, because we are okay with things changing, and we are okay with more truths revealing themselves to us as we go along. And we are also okay with having our minds changed, and we are comfortable in the unknown, because we don't believe that our safety and security comes with the world being knowable and predictable, but because we know that our connection to the thing that creates this world is strong, and we choose to make it get stronger every day. So here's to your rising.